Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Don't forget, July 9 through 11, Ardmore, Oklahoma, Preterist Pilgrim Weekend, theme, the book of Revelation. Got a great lineup. Make your plans to be with us, okay? All right, we're looking at the language of Matthew chapter 24 and verse 30, where Jesus, saying at the time, at the very height, the very denouement, if you please, of the great tribulation, the sun would be darkened, the moon would not give its light, the stars of heaven will not give their light, and then the sign of the Son of Man in the heavens will appear, and all the tribes of the earth shall mourn. Now, as I mentioned to you yesterday, it's very, very common for people to say, well, see, that's talking about everybody on the face of the globe. No, it's not. When this word phuli is used, phuli is translated as tribes, it is almost invariably referring to the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, this is driven home by the fact, number one, John applies this passage, this language, to the crucifixion of Christ. The time of his crucifixion, people were mourning. John quotes that. He quotes Zechariah chapter 12. But when we look closer at Zechariah chapter 12, there's simply no way in this world that you can make this into a global, quote, universal event. That doesn't mean it would not have global and universal meaning and importance, but it means it would happen in a given locale and be focused in that given locale. One of the things it seems to me that a lot of people have difficulty with is realizing that the Hebraic writers, who were so used to who commonly used hyperbolic, exaggerated language, they used universal language to speak of local events. That was just the way they expressed themselves. Over and over and over again in the Old Testament scriptures. For instance, Daniel chapter 2 is a great example of it. In Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 4, it says the God of heaven had given Nebuchadnezzar the rule and the kingdom and authority over every kingdom under the sun. Really? Did Nebuchadnezzar rule over North America and South America and China and all those countries? No. It's hyperbolic language. But anyway, Matthew chapter 24, verse 30 is a citation of Zechariah chapter 12. Now I'm going to begin reading verse 10. I'm going to read verses 10 through 14 so that we can sort of kind of get a grasp. Now, I absolutely love Zechariah. If you go to my website, donkpreston.com, and in the search bar, just type in Zechariah in that day. I have a series of articles there on the significance of Zechariah to New Testament eschatology. I think you'll find the entire series to be absolutely fascinating. But in the book of Zechariah, starting about chapter 8, maybe chapter 9, you find that term, in that day. That little term ties all of the teaching together temporally. I'm not going to take the time this morning to develop all of that, but I just want you to notice that the Lord made a promise, Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10, I will pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then when? When the Lord would pour out on the house of David the spirit, a spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look on me whom they pierced. Yes, they will mourn, as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for a firstborn. Does this strike you as strange? It has struck many, many commentators as strange. On the one hand, I'm going to pour out a spirit of supplication and grace. By the way, chapter 13, verse 1, in that day I will open a fountain for cleansing for the whole house of David. In that day what? When they look upon the one whom they pierced, when in the day that they mourn for the only begotten Son. These two are paradoxical, are they not? But they are supposed to happen at the same time. I will pour out on the house of David, on the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the spirit of grace and supplication. Then will they look on me, on him whom they pierced. And all the land shall mourn. All the tribes shall mourn. Folks, these are Siamese twins temporally. You can't separate them temporally. They're just two different sides of the same coin. On the one hand, God would provide grace, supplication, and cleansing. On the other hand, He would pour out destruction and judgment. So, yes, they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for a firstborn. In that day, there shall be great mourning in Jerusalem, like the mourning of Hadad Rimmon in the plain of Megiddo. Now, what in the world is that talking about? Well, it goes back to 2 Kings chapter 23, 25 through 29, when Josiah, the great king of Jerusalem, he realized that the king of Egypt was making an alliance with the king of Assyria. So Josiah, against his advisors' advice, went out to fight and to battle with the king of Egypt. And the king of Egypt killed him. And so the inhabitants those of Josiah's army brought him back to Jerusalem, and there was an incredible mourning over what happened at Megiddo. Megiddo. Har-Megiddo. See, great battles in Israel's history, great conflicts in Israel's history took place there. And here we are being told that during the time, at the time of looking upon the one whom they pierced, there was going to be great mourning, as bad as it was in the days of Josiah when he was slain for not obeying his counselors and perishing as a result. Now, where is this mourning taking place? Where is this mourning taking place? There shall be great mourning in Jerusalem, which means in all of Judea probably. Once again, this brings us back to the time of the abomination of desolation. It brings us back to the time of the Great Tribulation, all Judea-centric. It is not spread throughout the entire globe. We must honor this language. Now, the land shall mourn, every family by itself, the family of the house of David by itself, and their wives by themselves, the family of the house of Nathan by itself, their wives by themselves, the family of the house of Levi by itself, their wives by themselves, the family of Shammai by itself, their wives by themselves, and all the families that remain, every family by itself, and their wives by themselves. See, this is all of Judah, because that's where it happened. That was the epicenter. Now, I'm not trying to suggest, and I don't believe the Bible's trying to suggest, that there would not be peripheral suffering, but the foci of these events was Judah and Jerusalem. That's where the death of the Son would take place. That is where the great mourning would be as a result of what had been done to the Son. Now remember, Matthew chapter 24:30, what Jesus is predicting was going to take place at the end of the generation that killed the only son. It wasn't predicting the cross. That's totally anachronistic. Did they mourn for the only son in John 19? They most assuredly did. But Matthew 24 is not talking about and predicting John 19. Matthew 24:30 is talking about the time after John 19, but at the time when the mourning that occurred in John chapter 19 was going to be magnified many, many times over. Boy, we just barely got started on Zechariah chapter 12, haven't we? Okay, so tomorrow we're going to continue our examination of Zechariah chapter 12 and 13 and 14 by looking at these statements in that day to show beyond a shadow of a doubt this is all focused on the time of the judgment of Jerusalem and Judah. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you on the flip side.